Everyone, factoring into today's video, doing JMA Friday today, looking at the weather for the coming month. It takes us to the end of November, so going through to the final month of the autumn. So we're in a very mild air mass at the moment. We're going to be staying very mild for the coming week, and we'll see how long this is going to go on for with the Japanese model and also with the CFS V2 as well. So we'll have a look at all of the charts in a second. But before we get on with that, just very quickly to mention the ads, listening to articles on all of the pages at Gas Office, have a browse widget, click through the links so if there's any articles that you're interested in, and thanks very much for doing that. There's also video ads on most pages which open up in the content when you watch them. They'll close back up again, it's all helping to pay for the website. So thanks so much for getting involved, and thanks for doing that. So we'll start off with the 500 millibar height anomalies from the JMA, break it down into weekly periods. The first week period will take us from the week that we're currently in, the 30th of October through to the 6th of November. Blue extrapolates to low pressure, and orange, yellow and red extrapolates to high pressure. So for the coming week, we've got a big ridge sitting around and to the east of the country with a trough of low pressure in the middle of the Atlantic. The jet stream is going a bit like that. So it's high pressure dominating. It's not going to be completely dry. There will be a little bit of rain coming through at times, particularly to the north and the west. But overall high pressure very much in control, keeping the weather largely set fair. Now, with the position of high pressure, we're bringing up sort of southerly winds as well, so it's going to be very mild with that area of high pressure. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised to see a few date records tumbling next week. That's how warm it's likely to be. We go through to the next week period. It's going from the 6th through to the 13th of November, and very little change to the overall pattern really. But high pressure perhaps getting a little bit closer. It's actually over the top of the country now. The trough of low pressure is still in the Atlantic. Jet streams running through a bit like that. Maybe some bands of rain and wind coming into the far north and west of Scotland at times, but really it's still this ridge of high pressure that remains in control through to the middle of November, so still staying very mild. As we move through into the last 2 weekly periods, which takes us from the 13th through to the 27th of November, signs of a ridge beginning to collapse a little bit. It's still there across central parts of Europe, but this low pressure in the Atlantic probably becoming a bit closer to us. So it's probably turning more unsettled. This could be a transitional period, I would suspect. It is turning more unsettled here. But because of the orientation of the low pressure in the Atlantic and the ridge still parked over Central Europe, it's still likely to be very mild. We'll still be pulling up sort of southwesterly winds, the air coming up from the tropics. So a very, very mild month is possible here with what the JMA model is predicting. Let's have a look at CFS V2, and these are the 500 millibar high anomalies broken down into week periods. It's just updated. So we've got the ridge in across eastern and central parts of Europe and northeastern Europe for this week, with a trough of low pressure in the Atlantic. So a very good agreement there between the CFS and the JMA for next week's weather. The high pressure really dominant here across virtually the whole of Europe. And again, the flow is coming up from the south, so it's likely to be a very mild week. There will be a little bit of rain coming through at times. It's not going to be entirely dry throughout the whole week, but a lot of dry weather, especially for the time of year. We go through to the next weekly period. It's going from the 6th through to the 12th of November. And the ridge just carries on dominating the weather with a trough of low pressure in the Atlantic, so it still is mostly dry, a lot of dry weather. Could be some rain coming through at times, of course, but mostly dry and still very, very mild. As we go through to the next weekly period, this is going from the 13th through to the 19th, CFS is not really seeing a great deal of change here into the second half of the month. The ridge remains anchored across many central and northern parts of Europe. The trough of low pressure, which would normally be bringing us wet and windy weather this time of year, is stuck in the middle of the Atlantic. Again, the flow is going rather like that. So you see that the cold air is probably going down into central western parts of Russia, possibly southeast Europe. Could be one of those situations where we're unusually mild, while Greece and Turkey is unusually cold. But we will be mild on that sort of scenario again. We have got to think a little bit about mist and fog, maybe chilly nights if the sky is clear, but you wouldn't say it's a particularly cold air mass. It's just the fact that if it turns foggy by night could lower the temperatures a bit during the day. But this is a mild setup, a very mild setup, going through to the second half of the month. And then we go through to the last weekly period, long way away, of course. It's the 20th of November through to 26th. Yesterday, this period was indicating a bit of a change, a bit of a breakdown to unsettled conditions. Not as much sign of that on today's update. The high pressure is still there around northern and western and central parts of Europe, maybe as a weakening feature, but I don't think there's a great deal of change there, really, in the overall setup. So now to the end of the month, it could be staying mainly dry and very mild. Of course, as we go further out with these charts, then the reliability of them is falling, and I would suspect at some point we're going to get a change in the pattern. It would be very unusual to keep the pattern that we start November right through to the end of the month. So I would suspect that as we get through to later on in the month, we're probably going to see a bit of a change in the pattern, maybe something more unsettled, not necessarily a great deal colder, but certainly a little bit more unsettled possibly at the end of the month. The temperature anomalies from CFSV2 look like this. Very warm week coming up this week, temperatures way above average. This is the scale just here. We're talking about temperatures of around 2 to 3 degrees above average. We go through to the next week, the 6th to the 12th, and again, very significantly warmer than average, not just for us, but for most of Europe as well. So if you like cold weather, we're not the only ones that have sort of got an absence of cold weather. Most of Europe actually looking very mild through the coming couple of weeks. We go through to week 3, the 13th through to the 19th, no change, very mild outlook yet again, and then we move through to the last week, 20th to 26th. This is when yesterday CFSV2 was seeing chances of it turning a bit colder, not today. It's keeping it very mild indeed. The precipitation anomaly is looking like this, so the coming week significantly drier than average. The next weekly period, the 6th through to the 12th, turns a bit wetter in the north, so Scotland and Northern Ireland going a bit wetter than average. England and Wales have still is drier than average. The next weekly period, generally near normal to drier than average as well, from the 13th through to the 19th. And there may be signs that it turns a bit wetter than average, 20th to 26th. So although the temperatures aren't going down in that final week to 10 days of November, is turning a little bit wetter. So maybe there's still that idea at play there that it might start to turn a bit more unsettled into the latter stages of the month, but not a great deal of evidence that it's going to turn particularly cold. The CFSV2 city temperature graph from webweb.net looks like this for Birmingham for the next 6 weeks. You can find it to webweb on its page, by the way. So we're starting off very mild. The temperature scale is on the side of the chart here with the dates along the bottom. So we're starting off significantly milder than average, and we keep that going for the first 10 days at least of November. This is the 11th of November just here, and at that point again significantly milder than average. It's seeing a little bit of a drop for Birmingham men as we go through into middle stages of the month. Doesn't last all that long before temperatures start to pick up, but just for a time around mid-month it does turn a bit cold. We didn't really see much evidence of that in the temperature anomalies that we're just looking at, but within the data at webweb.net, within the city temperature graph, there is a bit of a cold snap appearing there for the middle part of the month. But then the second half of the month, temperatures pick up, and as we go through into the start of December, this is 1st of December, just here, generally a mild note with temperatures going a bit up and down, but generally milder than average. So except for this bit of a cold snap sometime around, say, the 15th to the 20th, that we see just here, I better get rid of all of these lines, just to indicate that again. So a bit of a cold snap appearing just there from around the 16th through to the 20th, something like that. Other than that, generally quite a mild month coming up. I mean, it would be a milder than average November, I think, on that sort of temperature forecast from the model. So this is how the anomaly is looking for November this morning. These change on a day-by-day basis, so have a look tomorrow look a bit different probably. But for November, the model is showing that we've got a zonal setup, high pressure to the south, low pressure to the north, and the jet stream coming through the country like that. So that's the reason it's generally a mild month being signalled in November, because we've got a westerly zonal type pattern. As we go through to December, a little bit of a change takes place through December. That graph is just looking at, but keeps it mild into December, only went up to around the first week of December. So this is the actual anomaly, 500 millibar height anomaly for the whole of the month, and it does show ridging through the middle part of the Atlantic with a trough of low pressure to the east. So what that would do is it would turn the winds into the northwest, possibly even a little bit to the north. So although on the graph it looks like December starts off quite mild, actually if it progressed like this, it would probably turn colder as the month went along. And this is quite an interesting ridge up here around Siberia. We would have to keep an eye on that. It's quite a strong ridge. And if that started to move over the top of the pole and down towards us in that sort of direction, then things could turn very, very cold indeed. But that's all very speculative. It's a long way off. That is for December. And really coming back to the more reliable time frame, which is November, it looks like we're in for certainly in for a very mild start to the month. Next week is going to be exceptionally mild at times, especially early on in the week. After that, I think we're going to keep it generally mild. Probably not as mild as it will be to start off, just by virtue of the fact, but it will be about as mild as we can get. So I think temperatures will come down a bit as we go through next week and into the second week of November, but still probably milder than average. May get a bit of a cooler snap around middle part of the month, but overall at the moment there's no sign of anything particularly cold coming up. As ever, things can change very, very quickly. So we'll keep monitoring what's happening and come back tomorrow for the weekend forecast. But that's all for now, and thanks for watching.